frameworks, one in .NET Framework and one in .NET Core. Okay, so I just suggest that whether the exam is MCQ or subjective or of any kind, right? You start creating programs as many as you can, right? And start solving problems as you encounter many more, right? Otherwise, you will find yourself in very trouble, right? When you will start with your projects. So this .NET Core, right, is a, you can say, software development framework, right, which is used to create different types of application. So using .NET Core, you can create a web application, right? Either it's a client or server side web application. You can create machine learning applications. You can create a gaming application, right? You can create, say, some web API applications. So any kind of application that you can think of can be created using .NET Core. And most of those applications also can be created using .NET Framework as well. Only there are some, say, disadvantage in terms of performance. Otherwise, except AI, machine learning, and cloud-based, all other applications which can be done or implemented using .NET Core can also be implemented using .NET Framework. Right. So there are many frameworks which are written on top of .NET Core, right? Like web application framework, web API framework, cloud framework, right, etc. So the main key is that this .NET Core is cross-platform, high performance, open source framework for building modern cloud-based internet connected application, cross-platform. Earlier, with .NET Framework, it can only be hosted on, or it can be created using the Windows OS. Now it is cross-platform, so you can use Windows, Mac OS, or Linux OS. Though still there are some limitations, and eventually, as now .NET 5 is released, right, within a couple of years, those problems would be removed. Then it is open source. Earlier it was proprietary. .NET Framework 4.8, which is the last version, right? It is proprietary. And that's why its code is not visible to anyone, right? While this .NET Core is open source, you can see the code of every component of .NET Core on the GitHub, right? So the main benefits and features of .NET Core are cross-platform, and we will discuss them one by one. Then it's the unified programming model for MVC and web API. That means whether you are creating a web application or web API application, the programming model followed is same, unified. Then the dependency injection. This is a very important criteria. And as we will learn more about MVC and Entity Framework Core, you will know that how powerful the dependency injection is. Then testability. Because nowadays, the unit testing is not a job of a QA. Unit testing is a responsibility of a developer, right? So the testability in any framework, in any application is very important. And here the unit testing is very straightforward. Later on also we will see that how unit testing can be included in the project itself. When you will create a project, it will allow you to create unit test cases. And as you write your code, automatically some of the test cases will be created. Open source, everything is open to everyone. Modular, right? Here, this approach is like a cloud computing. In cloud computing, you pay per use. Here also, in your application, you shouldn't have all components or library. Whatever your component you need, configure them in your applications. Remaining component, don't configure. Right? So it's a very modular approach. Whatever you need, configure and use. And then it has a tremendous command line support. Now let's try to understand this point one by one in little bit depth. Okay. So first of all, cross-platform. So as we are aware that ASP.NET 4.x, or specifically the last is 4.8, applications run only on Windows platform. Whereas .NET Core applications can be developed and run across different platforms like Windows, Mac OS, or Linux, right? Then the ASP.NET Framework applications can be hosted only on IIS, Internet Information Server, IIS, while the .NET Core application can be hosted on, say, IIS server, right? On Apache server, normally we host our Java application, PHP application, sometimes Python applications, right? So now even the .NET Core application can be hosted on Apache, or you can host them on a Docker as a component, right? Or even you can self-host in your process. That means you can host your application in another process of your application, right? So that is again a point, right, that we will frequently use in Web API. Then from a development standpoint, for .NET Framework, it is preferable that you use Visual Studio, right? But for .NET Core, you can use Visual Studio, right, which is currently the popular approach or a popular tool for .NET Core as well. But you can also use VS Code, okay, for .NET Core applications. But still, the Visual Studio would be, say, very much powerful in terms of support provided by it to a developer. Otherwise, there are many other editors that also you can use, for example, like Sublime, Bracket, VIM, etc. But still, personally, I prefer that Visual Studio is the most useful for developer. Then it is providing this unified programming model. So you are not aware with the approach in which the MVC applications are created in .NET Framework, right? As well as you are not aware that how Web API application is created in .NET Framework. Now, whenever I say .NET Framework and .NET Core, I believe that you will be able to relate it immediately. .NET Framework is the proprietary one and .NET Core is the open source. Okay. So with this .NET Framework, in the .NET Framework, the MVC application and the Web API, if you want to create, both has a different approach. Okay. Both must be created in a different manner in the same framework, right? While the Web API has a superior approach of, say, modularity. And that approach is now included in .NET Core for MVC as well. That means now here in this WDDN subject, you will learn about .NET Core MVC, right? So then you will take just 1 or 2 hours of tutorial for Web API in .NET Core, and you will know all about it. Because now in .NET Core, MVC and Web API, it's the same approach. Okay, so only some component instead of MVC, you will be using of Web API. That's it. Otherwise, underneath, it is the same structure. Okay, so in the next semester SOC subject, you will not learn about .NET Core Web API. You will learn about only .NET Framework Web API. Because when we'll finish this .NET Core MVC, we'll assume that now you know all about .NET Core Web API. It is not part of syllabus, so we will not ask any question in the exam, right? But we can trust on you that you will just learn it by yourself with just some efforts from your side. And this unified programming model is very much helpful in the concept of modularity. And these things, right now, it will seem some buzzwords to you, but don't worry, within next 3 lectures of .NET Core, you will realize all of these benefits. Okay. Dependency injection. So why dependency injection is useful? Assume that you have, say, many classes or say many files. Okay, now in these files you need some instance. Okay, for example, in one file, say in 5 files, you need the instance of employee. Okay, later on, say instead of employee, say you have changed something, say you have changed the name. Say instead of employee, now you are saying my employee. Then what you need to do? You need to go to all those files. You need to rewrite your code, right? So that is a burden. And these kind of problems will introduce errors and bugs in the applications, right? Because exhaustive testing is not possible, right? There is no code which is 100% bug free. And that's why to avoid this kind of dependency into the system, what you do is that whenever you need something, you need some type of object, you say that, okay, I need this. Okay, I need similar to this, but you don't specify exactly what you need. Okay, and then you have one place where you configure all your dependency. That whenever a user is asking for this kind of thing, give the user employee instance. Whenever a user is requesting for this kind of thing, give the student instance. So whenever you want to change, you just change it one place and automatically effect will happen at every place. So that's a dependency injection in short. Okay, we will have in-depth discussion on it when we'll study the entity framework, the database part. So whenever I say entity framework, it is the database in .NET Core. Okay. Then testability. So with built-in dependency injection and the unified programming model, right, for your web application, the unit testing is very straightforward. When you will create a .NET Core applications, you will have option to create a unit test application along with it, right? So open source and community focused. So the advantage of open source is that you have the biggest community support, right? So the link is given. You can check any core of .NET Core on the GitHub. And the .NET Core is shared with MIT's license. That means you can use for personal use, private use, as well as professional use, or you can say commercial use. Then this modular HTTP request pipeline. That means whatever you need, configure, remaining, just don't worry about it. Okay, you need exception handling, introduce or configure exception handling. You need authentication, configure. You need authorization, configure. You need filter, configure. Otherwise, don't worry about it. Okay, so that is the modular HTTP request pipeline. Okay, and these authentication, authorization, exceptions, these components are known as middleware, right? Because it is in between the client and the, say, the code, right? So these components are middleware. Whichever component you need, whichever middleware you need, configure them. So here, right, the MVC is also component, and web API is also component, right? Probably you are aware with this MVC, like model, controller, view. So all of these are component. If you only need controller, you don't need view. Then you only add component for controller. You don't worry about view, right? You need a controller with a view, then you add a component which has a controller as well as view. So that is how the modularity is added in .NET Core, right? So it is very much convenient. And this is how you can avoid the overhead for the application. Then CLI support. So that is very rich in comparison to the .NET framework. Here we will not compare the CLI support in terms of other framework, like for example, Laravel, right? Because there this support is even more rich. But in .NET Core, they have tried to make it more, say, comfortable to the developer. And in .NET 5, it is even more comfortable. Okay. So here with command line, you can do anything. You can create a project, you can add packages, right? And then you can add packages from your machine itself or from the package manager like npm, NuGet, etc. You can build your code, you can run your code, you can test your code in terms of unit testing. You can deploy from the command line itself, right? So all these things you can do from the command line itself. And we will be working with command line only in this class. Later on, we'll start with Visual Studio. Okay. But those who are more comfortable in command line, they can definitely go with it. So it is helpful to do everything you want to do, right? That means whatever you can do using Visual Studio or VS Code, you can also do with .NET Core CLI. So I believe that you all must have downloaded .NET Core when you install Visual Studio 2019, right? I advise that don't use a Visual Studio version previous than the 2019, right? Because in a lower version of 2017, you can't install .NET Core 3.1, right? So far in market, there are 3 .NET Core versions which are popular: 2.x, 3.x, and 5. The 5 is not known as .NET Core; it is .NET 5. Okay, but .NET 5 is very new, just released a few months before, right? It is not stable, and that's why we will go with .NET Core. There is a very wider difference between .NET Core 2.x and 3.x, right? And there is very much similarity between .NET Core 3.1 and .NET 5. And that's why we will continue with .NET Core 3.1. And for that, use Visual Studio 2019. Again, you can go with Community Edition as well. It is sufficient for us. So download .NET Core 3.1. Okay, let's start. So now, once the .NET Core SDK is installed in your machine, right? Then from your command prompt, and now this is a standard command prompt. If you remember in Visual Studio or in .NET Framework, we were using a specific command prompt. What was the command prompt? Not PowerShell. Developers, yes. We were using the developers command prompt for Visual Studio, right? When you were running your assembly applications, then we were using not Windows command prompt, whether the usual command prompt or PowerShell. We were using the Visual Studio's command prompt, but now it is not required. So we can use our the basic command prompt, which is available in our system itself. Okay, and you just need to type .NET, and then it will give you several options. Okay, for example, if I want to know the version of my .NET Core, then I'll specify .NET -- version. So it will give me the version. Okay. Now let's say we want to create an application. So I'm just changing my directory from C to D. Then I'm moving to another directory, .NET Core. Okay, within that, so there is another directory, apps, and then I'm creating an application. So .NET new, and say I'm not aware. Say I want to create. Say I may want to create a console application. I may want to create a class library application. I may want to create an MVC application, web API application, unit test application. I'm not sure, right? What is the keyword for it, right? For example, I want to create a console application, then .NET new console. Web application, then .NET new MVC or web. I'm not sure what is the keyword. Then you can simply specify .NET space new, and then it will give you all possible templates which can be created using your SDK. So here the template says that, okay, for console application, the short name is console, and these are the languages which it supports. And for class library, this is the short name that you can use. For WPF, right, which is Windows Presentation Foundation, you can use WPF, and so on. Okay. So right now, say we want to create a console application. So what we will write? .NET new console. So it will create a console application. And if we check what is available in this created application, then we will basically see two files, program.cs and csproj file. Your program name .csproj file. So csproj is your project file, C# project file. Okay. And what the project file will have? Project file will have your dependencies information, which packages you have installed, right? Then which client-side library you have installed, for example, say Bootstrap, jQuery, etc. So all this information will be available in your project file. Then what is the version of your .NET Core, right? Which kind of application you are targeting, etc. So all these informations are available in csproj file or project file. Then the program.cs will have your main method, which is the starting point of our application. Okay, so this is our csproj file. So here you can see that output type is exe. So it's a console application, so it will execute as an exe. And the target framework is Net Core App 3.1. So this Net Core App 3.1 is Target Framework Moniker, TFM. That means whenever you want to use .NET Core application of version 3.1, the TFM you need to use is Net Core App 3.1. For example, I want to use .NET Core 2.3. Then the target framework moniker is Net Core App 2.3. For example, I want to use .NET 5. Then the TFM, the target framework moniker is Net 5. Okay, so this TFM we specify in the target framework, that which framework we are targeting. And here we specify in the project, we specify the SDK we are using. Right now you can see that we have not installed any other packages, and that's why there is no reference of it. Okay, then this is the program.cs, okay, which is having a main method. We will discuss more about it in the next lecture when we will start with the web application. Right, here the only question I want to ask is that why in the program class the main method is static? Because normally this question is asked later on during the interview and students are not able to answer this properly. or even Viva also sometimes this question is asked, that why, so the main method is static. Okay, there is a question that what if version is 5? Okay, my personal advice is that don't go for .NET 5 because we won't be teaching it, right? And there are some difference in terms of, say, the middleware pipeline in .NET framework, .NET Core 3.x and .NET 5. So right now, don't go with .NET 5. Yes, correct. You all are answering in the correct manner. The answer is very simple, right? Here the question should be why. Question should be why it shouldn't be static rather than why it is static. Because if it is not static, then how you will execute the main method, because it is the starting point of your application, right? And that's why it should be the static. The next thing that you should always remember is that in .NET Core, whichever application you create, console, class library, web API, right? Cloud computing application, AI application, machine learning application, any application you will create, all application will start as a console application. In .NET Core, any type of project you create, all type of project, initially it will start as a console application. And from the main method, it will call a web component, or it will call API component, or call machine learning application, etc. Right? So all .NET Core application always starts as a console application, and then it changes according to the type of applications you have created. And these we will see in detail in the next class when we'll create a web application. Okay, but just remember that in whichever .NET Core application you create, always you will have program.cs. Program.cs will have main method, and the code of main method would be different based on the type of project you have created. Okay. Then when we want to compile and build our application, .NET build, it will build, right? If here we don't have any error, so just use .NET run, so it will run your application. Okay. Now here there is just a demonstration is added. It was a request last time that how to use in Visual Studio Code, okay, VS Code. That's why this is added. So you create an application, right? And if you are in the same directory, use this code and then dot. So it will open your project of current directory in the VS Code. I believe you must be aware, right? Because now this batch is comparably more aware of VS Code than the previous one, right? Then from the VS Code terminal also you can use all the .NET command, CLI command, and you can invoke them from the terminal itself, right? Now here, what if you want to specify a specific name for your application? Then you can use this name option. Okay, name, and you specify the name of your application, like in this case CF1. Okay, so it will create an application with the name CF1. And here I'm creating an application of type class library. You can see .NET new class library, and the name is CL1. Why I'm doing is that because I want to explain that how we can add a reference of a class library project to a console application. You all know the purpose of class library, right? In the class library, you will have classes and you will have methods within the classes. That means you will have types and type members, right? Individually, they are nothing, but you will use the facility of your class library in some of your application. But for that, what you need to do is you need to add reference in your console application or web application or wherever you want to use your class library project. Because when you will add a reference, after that you can use the type and type members of your class library. Okay. In say Visual Studio, it is very easy to add reference. Right click and add reference, right? But in CLI, you need to use command .NET add reference. And here you can see that my current directory is CF1, which is my console application. So I want to add reference in console application for some another class library project or package. So .NET add reference, and where my reference project file is available. So it's class library one's project file. Once we do that, then this class library reference is added in the console application. So now you can see that here in the item group, you will have this class library project reference. In similar manner, for example, you add a package of say entity framework, you add a package of say uh, some JSON library, right? Then those references would be added here in the item group. Okay, whether you install or add them from the console, you add them from the say by right clicking add reference, or you add them from the package manager console. Okay, there are many methods and we will see each of them one by one. Okay, so now you can see that here we have two applications, the console application and the class library. In the class library, we have a class one which has the method name, and say we want to use it in our console application. So as we have added a reference, now we can use it. How can we use it? Using namespace, right? We need to specify the namespace in the console application. Fine. So here the namespace is cl1 in our class1.cs. So when you go to your console application, say program.cs, you will use namespace using cl1, and then now you can use the class one which is available in your here, right? And you can create an instance of it and you can invoke or use the method name. So this is the usual approach that you were also doing in the .NET Framework assembly programs. It's the same thing, right? As I said, there are many ways to add packages. Okay, if you want to add package from the console, so this is NuGet. I hope that you all are aware of NuGet, right? Now the only thing is that when you use NuGet packages or when you use packages from NuGet, right, by default you will see that version is 5, but some of the packages may not be compatible in 3.x, so you should check it, right, whether it is compatible in 3.x or not. If it is not compatible, this given version of package, then you need to identify the version of package which is compatible in 3.x. Okay, so normally after installing a package, when you try to compile and if it is a giving error, right, instead in terms of your packages, or when you try to install and it is giving error in terms of version, then the reason would be the version is not compatible. Okay, so this is because normally when you copy this code, so as I said, packages can be installed from the CLI. Then you go to NuGet, you search for your package. For example, I want to install Bootstrap. Okay, then I'll find out this .NET CLI command. Okay, I'll copy and I'll execute on the CLI. Okay, but then I'll not pay more attention on this version -version 500. Okay, that means it is for targeting .NET 5, not for .NET Core 3.x. Okay, so when during the installation or during the compilation of your application, if you get error related to your package, then the reason would be it is not compatible. So just identify a package which is targeting version 3.1. Fine, so now that Bootstrap is installed, so you can see that it is available in the CS_proj file. Now, when to use .NET Core, when to use .NET Framework. Okay. So many suggest and many wonder that when .NET Core is available and now even .NET 5, then why we should learn .NET Framework, right? And many of you wouldn't be even aware about Visual Basic, right? So Visual Basic is a framework which was used the 10 to 12 years, back, right? And now the support is even stopped since last 12 years to be exact. And still there are some projects which are implemented in Visual Basics and still in support environment, right? So even the technology is dead, but if project is created using the technology, you need developer, you need person to support it. In similar manner, now the .NET Framework, right, they have stopped providing support for it, and there won't be a next version of 4.8 after 4.8. But still, at least for a couple of years, as there are many projects already created in .NET Framework, right, there are many people required for .NET Framework as well. And there are very wide difference between .NET Framework and .NET Core in terms of web application. And that's why the migration is not that much straightforward, right? You can't simply migrate your .NET Framework web application into .NET Core web application. Okay, and that's why still for a couple of years, both will remain in, say, market. So you should use .NET Core when you are starting a project and you have a cross-platform needs. Then you are targeting microservices. So we have web services, we have REST API, we have then the SOAP components, but all of them work properly with .NET Framework. But if you are targeting microservices and you want to use Microsoft technologies, microservices are not only related with Microsoft. Okay, you can use microservices with Python, Java, Microsoft technologies like .NET. So if you want to use microservices, then it is only available in .NET Core, not in .NET Framework. If you want to, say, deploy your component containers on Docker, then your only choice is .NET Core. Say, if you need a high performance and scalable system, which is targeted by, say, all kind of handheld devices, then .NET Core is a preference. And say you need side-by-side .NET versions per application. That means your application can target .NET Core 2.x, .NET Core 3.x, and .NET 5. Then it is possible in .NET Core. Such things are not possible in .NET Framework. Right? You create an application. So whenever you will create a .NET application, .NET Framework applications, you will see that this application targets to which specific .NET Framework version. Right? And if you will simply change Visual Studio even, you will face some issues. If that specific .NET Framework is not available, right? This side-by-side execution is possible with .NET Core. You should use .NET Framework when already you have an application which is running on .NET Framework. Okay, if you have more need of third-party libraries, NuGet packages, right, which are not available in .NET Core. In current situation, there are many packages which are available in .NET Framework, not available in .NET Core. Microsoft is promoting .NET Core, .NET 5, but still there are many facilities which are more powerful in .NET Framework, and for them packages are available. Even for, say, utility like database. For database, several required utilities are still not available in .NET Core, right? Then, if you are using an application that does not support .NET Core, right, then you must go with .NET Framework. So in current situation, still for MVC or web application, .NET Framework is more powerful than .NET Core. And even .NET Framework is more powerful than .NET 5. And the only one reason is that many packages which are implemented for .NET Framework are still not written for .NET Core or .NET 5. What is the reason? Earlier it was proprietary. So they had manpower to write those packages, code for those packages. Now it is open source. So it is based on the community, and community is not that much strong as it is with other programming languages and frameworks. And that's why it is lagging. But hope in couple of years, it will be in sync. Right? Now, the question is, what is the difference between SDK and runtime? When you will go for downloading .NET Core or .NET Framework, right, or any other framework, usually you will have two choices. You want to download SDK or you want to download runtime. Now, what is the difference? Because many times students, they install runtime and then they complain that they can't create or they can't find a .NET Core application in Visual Studio, right? Or they can't create. Then what is the reason? What is the difference between SDK and runtime? Okay, so here earlier, there was a question of microservices. Okay. For example, say right now you are creating an application, say web API application or a web application, right? Say you are creating eGOV. So in eGOV, what you will have? You will have one database in which you will have several tables like employee table, student table, exam tables. That is usual approach. One database, and within that you will have multiple tables. Now in microservices, you try to say do the loose coupling. That means they will not have any dependency. So you will have different services, like you will have student services, you will have employee services, you will have exam services. Student service will have its own table and database. Employee service will have its own table and database, right? And in this manner, all your processes are treated as one service. Okay, and they'll be executed independently. So that is microservices. Okay, so that means all your components are separate. It's not like a monolithic approach. In monolithic, everything is together like one CPU, right? Here each component is separated. What is the advantage? Independent, lightweight, and they can be integrated with an application. So that is microservices. Okay. All DB are most normalized. Are you trying to ask that should we normalize compulsorily or not? In microservices, Rishi, here it depends how you are creating microservices. For example, say you are using .NET Core for creating, say, web application, API application, or microservices. You will not worry about this. What you will do is you will only write classes. You will write class for employee, you will write class for student. And the remaining task, you will uh, move it on your framework, right? Here, when you will write classes, automatically the tables and database would be created. Okay. And based on that, whether you need a normalization or not, if you need a normalization up to certain level, you need to specify certain line of code, that's it. Okay. You need not design everything by yourself. So in terms of a microservices, if you use in .NET Core or .NET 5 with, right, then the normalization is not basically our problem. Okay, it can be taken care of at class level itself. And here, by saying that it is not our problem means that there are some packages are available which will do the required thing automatically. Okay, definitely we need to do it, but through packages. Fine, so let's now focus on our question. What is the difference between SDK and runtime? Yes, anyone? Yes, correct. SDK is for building application and running as well for development. And runtime you need to install where your applications will be run, right? So runtime is required where development is not required. So runtime is a lightweight, and the SDK is not lightweight because it will have all the tools which are required for supporting the development. Okay, and here now whenever I say development, the testing and everything will comes together. Let's take the next question. Now onwards, I'll try to include some questions along with each discussions that we have. Okay. Now, what is this core CLR? So definitely you won't be aware of it. Okay. So if and we all are using .NET Framework 4.5 and higher. Right now we are using .NET Framework 4.8, right? So in .NET Framework 4.8, or if you say 4.5 and higher, the C# compiler is it is not known as C# compiler or CSC. It is known as Roslyn. Okay, if someone asks you what is Roslyn, so it is nothing but the CSC you were executing. But from .NET Framework 4.5 onwards, it is given a code name Roslyn. Okay, and why I am just highlighting these kind of facts? The reason is that these are the things which are normally asked in the interview, right? Then for F#, you can see still it is F# 4.1. Based on the version, that's the compiler. For VB, it is also the Roslyn. And Roslyn is still the compiler in .NET Core for C#. Okay. Now, what is this Core FX? So Core FX is nothing but the MFC, Microsoft Foundation Class Library. I hope this MFC ring the bell. When you were studying .NET Framework in the introductory lectures, right, you might be aware of MFC classes, Microsoft Foundation classes. So all these classes and its namespaces, now in .NET Core, they are known as Core FX. Okay. So as you are aware, that when you compile your code, whether it is written in C#, F#, VB, right? We will have MSIL as well as metadata, manifest and metadata, right? And there we'll use this core CLR for compiling our code into the native code. Earlier it was CLR, right? Common language runtime. In .NET Core it is core CLR. Then for just-in-time compilation we were using JIT. Now here in .NET Core it is UJIT. And these are nothing but the code name. Okay. So core CLR is the .NET Core's common language runtime, right? Which will compile your code into the native code. Okay, there is a question for repeating core FX. So core FX is the library classes that you have, right? The namespace is different that you have. That is core FX. For example, if you want to use collection classes, then you need to write using system.collections.generic or using system.collections, right? So where it is available? It is available in core FX. Okay, like earlier in .NET Framework, it was available in MFC, or they were known as MFC, Microsoft Foundation classes. So here it is known as core FX. Fine. Now we will start with concepts which is required before we start with MVC. Okay, so now probably we'll spend 3 lectures on learning about how to create a web application and what concepts we should learn before we learn about MVC. So it will take a couple of weeks before we actually build a full-fledged database driven MVC web application. Okay. So as this is a season of monsoon, right? And probably you might have observed that after rain, you will see that grass and trees, leaves and everything looks more greener. So what is the reason? That sometimes in your garden, even you regularly say give water to your plants and trees, but still they don't look that much greener. But after rain, they start looking more greener. So what is the reason? Anyone? Definitely, this is not part of syllabus. Right? Chlorophyll, no, that's not the reason. No, dust is washed away. No, that's also not a reason. The reason is nitrogen. Okay, in the raindrops, there is a dissolved nitrogen. Right, so whenever you take a rain bath, you are also taking some nitrogen bath as well. But it's good that our skin doesn't become greener, right, after taking a rain bath. Okay, otherwise probably we would seem like Hulk, right? Hulk was green. Okay, now we are starting with .NET Core MVC. And if you search for this ASP.NET Core MVC in the Google, still today you will find this kind of output. And here the first one is the tutorials by Kudvenkat. You will find many books on .NET Core, but none of them is sufficient for learning all about .NET Core. Okay, so our flow will be based on Kudvenkat, but there it is tutorial series. So they will tell you that what to code. They will not explain much about it. From where you will find the explanation? Docs of .NET Core, right? So most of the discussion now on .NET Core, right? It will be the flow of Kudvenkat. It will be supported by the documentation from .NET Core. So you can go with Kudvenkat, you can go with .NET Core docs, or you can simply read the slide, which is a combination of both, right? Because still there is no one book which is sufficient for a curriculum. Okay, so this is the best tutorial for .NET Core. Okay, and there are many tutorials are available, but definitely we won't be covering all of them. Okay, but the flow is really very good. If you have a time and energy, I sincerely advise that you go with all tutorials. But the only problem is that these tutorials are in .NET Core 2.x. Okay, so many times their code will not work. The only configurations you will be requiring it at one or two places, because this is modular. So only those component you need to install is different. The underneath the facility is same. Because when these kind of things are created new, many times what they do is they simply change the package name. Underneath most of the facilities are same, and they are changing package name because of some conflict, as they are creating new things, right? So that's why some packages are not available in 2.x, some are not available in 3.x, and so on. Okay, so whenever if you are following this code venkat, you get an error. Probably the reason is that you need to reconfigure your pipeline. You need to change some of the packages. That's it. Or sometimes you need to just reorder them. Okay. Or you can just follow the .NET Core tutorials from the Microsoft docs.microsoft.com. Or simply you can use slides, okay, which I'll definitely share with you, right? Because I've also taken help from them. Okay. So let's start with creating first application. So now I'll not worry about CLI, because our goal is not to learn .NET Core with CLI, right? Our goal is to learn .NET Core, and the most convenient manner is the Visual Studio. So here, if you will search for web, you will find this ASP.NET Core web application template. Okay, and you can see that this application can be created for cloud in C#, can be created and hosted on Linux, Mac OS. It can act as a service. When it acts as a service, that means you can host this application within itself. Okay, it can be a web application, it can be a Windows application. That means from the web application, you can create a WPF application. You are not aware of WPF, so let's not worry about it. Okay, so WPF is also it's a very popular concept in industry. Okay? And it is basically nothing but a Windows application. So now we will create ASP.NET Core web application. You will also have an option of ASP.NET web application. And in the parenthesis, .NET framework would be written. So just make sure that you create correct application, right? Now our focus is .NET Core web application.
There are two titles in the description, the first and last.
Okay. Next time, just try to type question in the chat box. Okay. So here there is a question that if you see in the slide, there is a first template and there is a last template. There is a first template and there is a last template. Both are same ASP.NET Core web application, but one is in C# language, another is in F# language. So the language is different. Okay. Okay. So Keval has done a job of probably finding out the link of Code Venkat, right? So I think Keval, all your friends are very capable enough, right? They can do their own work very easily. F# is a language. Okay, here I want to ask one question. Suppose I have one language ABC. Okay, I have a language ABC. I don't know whether there is actually a language named ABC or not. But say I have one. Is there? Is there any language named ABC? No, right? So if there is a language ABC, can I use ABC for creating .NET Core or .NET Framework program? F# is a language, VB is a language, C# is language, C++ is language. You can use C++ to create .NET Framework program. Okay, you can use PHP. Sorry, you can use Python to create .NET Core program. You can integrate Python and .NET Core programs. That means your Python can call .NET Core, your .NET Core can call Python, right? You can't integrate in one .cs file, you can't have Python. But from .cs, you can call a Python file. Okay. But for example, say I have ABC language. Can I use it for .NET Framework or .NET Core? What do you think? Maybe is the answer yes and no. That's not the answer actually, right? Yes, correct. We can use if the language targets .NET compiler. Right, like you have Roslyn for C#, you have F# compiler for F#, C# compiler, sorry, C++ compiler for C++. Similarly, if you create, say, ABC compiler for ABC, then the ABC compiler will target your CLR, core CLR, then we can use ABC. Right, if you have ABC language, if you have ABC compiler, which is targeting CLR, right, then you can use ABC for .NET framework. If you have ABC language, which can be compiled using ABC compiler, which targets, say, core CLR, then you can use ABC to create .NET Core application. So many times this is also a question, popular question, right? Can you use any language to write .NET framework or .NET Core code? Yes, if you have a compiler that compiles and targets CLR or core CLR, then it happens, right? Okay, so here the one template is for F#, another is for C#. So always be careful. So now we will create this one application, staff management, and probably we'll continue with it for next 2 to 3 weeks. Okay. And when we will create our application, right? Here we will see different templates like empty. That means you want to create a project, empty project, or API, web API, or web application with MVC. We want to create web application with MVC, but we will not select that template. We will write all code that we need to create for web application MVC, so that we know everything about it. Okay. Otherwise, whatever we will learn in next 3 weeks, then we will teach you in 10 minutes that all these things can be done only in 10 minutes. But then it would be scaffolding. The code is generated automatically. Then you don't know what is happening within it, right? So it is good, right? If you want to create a project and if you want to impress someone, but it is not good for learning it, right? So we will first teach you everything, and then we will teach you that how you can do those things immediately. It is scaffolding, and you can learn by yourself as well. Okay, fine. So let's stop here. From here, we will continue in the next class. So thank you very much for joining me. Take care.